Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the rough spun tunic of someone you definitely wouldn't want to be, a medieval stable boy. You know, one of those faceless figures, hauling hay, dodging hooves, and somehow managing to smell worse than the horses they serve. You wake up to a sound that isn't quite a rooster, more like a cross between a mule's sneeze and your own stomach groaning for mercy. It's still dark. The stars haven't even clocked out. But your day? Oh, it started yesterday. The air is cold and damp, the kind that seeps through your teeth and into your bones. Your bed is a pile of straw that smells suspiciously like someone else's accident, and your pillow is, technically, your elbow. You stretch, carefully, because moving too fast might alert the rat currently sharing your blanket to attack. And don't even think about rolling over for 5 more minutes. Rule number one of being a stable boy: the horses wake up whenever they want, and when they do, they don't gently neigh, they kick, loudly, repeatedly, preferably at walls, or each other, or worst of all, you. You stumble up, barefoot, because your one pair of shoes is currently drying by the fire, or was. You suspect someone nicked them, again. Your tunic smells like fermented sweat and regret, but changing is a luxury. You brush off some hay and maybe a beetle, yank on your belt, and step outside into the pre dawn mud. The courtyard is empty, save for that one rooster who clearly didn't get the sun not up yet memo. You walk past the manor's kitchens, from which zero delicious smells emerge. Because breakfast? Not for you, friend. Not until you've shoveled approximately 30 pounds of equine feces. This is your kingdom now, the stables. A long, crooked building held together by prayer, urine, and an occasional plank of actual wood. Inside, 12 stalls, 100 smells, and at least 3 horses plotting your demise. It's not even 5 a.m. You grab the pitchfork and start mucking. And here's the historical bit that might shock you. In many medieval estates, stable boys actually started before the livestock handlers, cooks, or even the monks rang the first bell. The horses had to be fed, brushed, and ready before their noble masters even rubbed the crust from their eyes. Why? Because in feudal Europe, your horse was basically your status symbol, your transportation, and, if you were lucky, your excuse not to walk through knee-deep mud like the rest of us peasants. As you work, you feel a familiar ache creeping into your back. It's the same spot that went stiff 2 days ago after lifting a water bucket that was less bucket and more pond with a handle. But you keep going, because stopping means your master's horse might step into an unshoveled pile and throw a tantrum, and tantrums lead to bruises. On you. You scoop, you sweat, you whisper apologies to your sore arms, and just when you think you've cleared out one stall, the giant mare in the next one looks you dead in the eye and lets loose. Again. She does this every morning. You've named her Lady Vengeance. Historians still argue whether horses were smart enough to hold grudges, but Lady V, you're pretty sure she writes them down. Somewhere in the rafters, a pigeon coos in disapproval. Above it, a spider spins its web for the 100th time. You wonder if spiders feel this tired. Probably not. They don't have to mop up horse pee with their one good tunic. You move on to feeding. Oats, hay, and water. But not for you. The horses eat first. Always. It's an unspoken rule, the kind of tradition that doesn't need to be carved into stone because it's already burned into your soul. You lug a sack of grain bigger than your torso, your feet sliding in muck, arms shaking like overcooked noodles. By the time you reach the last stall, you're seeing stars. Not celestial ones, the ones that flash right before a blackout. You lean against the wooden wall, splinters pricking your palm, and remind yourself this is normal. You're 16, maybe 15. Maybe you don't actually know. Birthdays aren't exactly tracked when you're busy counting blisters. Instead, you do remember being smaller though, barely tall enough to reach a saddle strap. Now, you're tall enough to scrape your head on the stable beam every other morning. You do it again today and curse under your breath. Not too loud though. Your master is a light sleeper, and technically, swearing in his presence is a punishable offense. Last week, your friend Tom muttered something about moldy goat dung and ended up scrubbing chamber pots with a toothbrush sized bristle for 2 days. Toothbrushes don't exist yet, but the brush might have been one. The horses seem content, for now. But your job isn't done. You step outside just as the sky turns from black to bruised purple. The first sliver of morning light creeps across the fields, revealing mist, mud, and about 50 fresh hoof prints exactly where you just raked yesterday. Great. You stretch again. Your back cracks in 3 places, each louder than the last. A rooster squawks, offended. You consider squawking back, but then you hear it, the manor bell. A single clear chime. It means the master is awake, and you're already behind. You wipe your hands on your tunic, immediately regret it, and break into a tired jog back to the stables. The noble's horse needs brushing, saddle inspection, and shoe checking, and heaven help you if there's even one burr caught in that luxurious mane. As the sun creeps up, you finally let out a breath, not a sigh. You can't afford those. They might turn into tears, and those just waste water. The horses are fed. The stalls are temporarily clean, and you haven't been kicked yet. You stand still for one moment, just one, as the light hits the stable roof. Steam rises from manure piles like tiny angry ghosts. The flies begin to swarm, and somewhere behind you, Lady Vengeance coughs. And you know she's planning something. You're not even allowed to yawn yet. Not until every stall has been raked, every water bucket checked, and every oat bin topped off twice. Because rule number 2 in the unspoken and highly unforgiving code of stable boys is this: muck before you breathe. It's not written anywhere, of course, but you learn it fast, usually around the time your superior, who's 12 and somehow already has a mustache, chucks a wooden scoop at your head for leaving a hoof print in a freshly cleaned stall. You drag the rake behind you like it's the sword of Damocles, except it's covered in soggy straw and regret instead of symbolic menace. The straw is everywhere, in your boots, in your hair, possibly in your lungs. You're not even sure what counts as clean anymore. You've been raking the same stall for 15 minutes, and it somehow looks worse than before. You look up. The master's prized gelding is watching you, judging you. His name is Chestnut, which is both painfully uncreative and completely irrelevant because you've taken to calling him Sir Fartsalot. He earns the name 5 times a day, minimum. And now he's glaring at you, probably offended. You offer a weak smile. He sneezes directly onto your tunic. Steam, mucus, dignity, 0. Back to the rake. Historically, stables in medieval Europe weren't the wide, sun-dappled barns you see in fairy tales. They were more like long, narrow sheds, half mud, half mildew, fully cursed, with little to no drainage, which means you're working in a soup of yesterday's mistakes. And the horses? They do not care. They will walk into a freshly cleaned stall and immediately redecorate it with a level of chaos that would impress a raccoon with a vendetta. You scoop it all, again, and wonder how such a majestic creature can smell like a boiled cabbage. But you can't stop, because this is the part of the morning where the steward does his first walkthrough. And the steward? Oh, he lives for two things: passive aggressive comments and finding dirt in corners. Even physics says dirt shouldn't reach. You once saw him stick his pinky finger into a knot in the wood and declare the entire building spiritually unclean. You rake faster. Behind you, one of the younger boys drops his pitchfork. It clangs against the wall. The gelding rears slightly, a twitch of tail and muscle. You freeze, the rake halfway through a pile that could qualify as a topographical feature on a medieval map. Silence. Then a breath. You get lucky. No hooves fly, no screaming, just a loud snort and the unmistakable sound of a horse urinating directly into the fresh straw. You don't cry, but your eye twitches in a way that says you might later. You finish mucking your fourth stall. Only 8 to go. Here's a quirky little fact to keep your brain occupied. In some monastic stables, mucking duty was considered a kind of moral purification, a spiritual reminder that no one, not even the holiest monk, is above shoveling excrement. The logic seems questionable, but sure. Meanwhile, you're spiritually ascending at the pace of a limping snail. Your hands are red, your wrists ache, your knees feel like someone filled them with stale bread. And the smell? Let's just say your nose has filed an official complaint and refuses to participate anymore. You lean your rake against the stable wall and step outside for a breath of air. Mist still clings to the ground like a depressed ghost. The sky's a pale bleached blue now. The sun hasn't broken over the manor roof yet, but the birds have started yelling at each other, probably about breadcrumbs, or politics, or the meaning of life. Birds are dramatic like that. You let yourself breathe once, and then the bell rings again. Second bell, nobles waking, which means horses must be saddled, hooves brushed, feed buckets topped off again, because the master's steed might want second breakfast. Unlike you, you go back in, and it hits you. The stables never actually get clean. They get temporarily less awful. Mucking is a Sisyphean task. The moment you finish, nature begins undoing your work. You're not cleaning. You're losing a daily war to entropy and digestion. And still, you can't stop. You reach for a bundle of fresh straw from the loft above. It's damp, probably moldy. You fluff it anyway, laying it down in a bed shape that says, I tried. The horse won't care. He'll roll in it, sneeze in it, and by this afternoon, poop on it, like it insulted his ancestry. But still, you try. Another rule, not one they say out loud, but one you figure out quick. Never show that you're tired. Not to the steward, not to the master, not even to the horses. Because the moment you slow down, someone else gets your task, and you get their punishment. You hear someone gag in the stall next to you. Third pile today, mutters the boy. You think his name's Oswin, or maybe Alan. You've never asked. Bonding's dangerous. Friends can be reassigned, or worse, disappear. You nod at him. He shrugs and keeps shoveling. And here's the strange part. After an hour, it all blurs. The smells fade into the background. Your hands work without thinking. You become a machine built for one job. Remove waste, repeat. This is your morning, every morning. The only variation? Sometimes it rains, and the mud reaches your knees. Sometimes a goat escapes and eats your breakfast. Sometimes a noble son comes down and wants to see the poor boys and laughs at your name like it's part of a joke you didn't agree to. But mostly, it's just mucking, always mucking. And by the time the third bell rings, signaling breakfast for everyone else, you're soaked in sweat. Your tunic clings to you like wet parchment, and you've still got half the stalls left. You pause. Briefly, you glance up at the loft, at the tiny window carved in the stone. A ray of sun slices through, catching dust motes and the faint glisten of a spider web. It's almost pretty, until a fly lands on your lip and you're back to work. You're halfway through brushing a particularly irritable mule named Godfrey, who, by the way, has never once earned that name when it happens. Again, you make eye contact with the mare, not just any mare, her, Lady Elsbeth. And before you can finish blinking, she swings her hindquarters toward you with all the subtlety of a siege engine. You leap backward, narrowly dodging a fresh horseshoe to the kneecap. Rule number 3 is not a metaphor. It's survival. Never turn your back on the mare. Elsbeth isn't evil, just aware. Aware that you're young, clumsy, and one bad morning away from quitting. She's owned by one of the manor's more anxious daughters, a noble girl with a penchant for soft hands and dramatic sighs, which means Elsbeth has been brushed more gently than a poet's ego and fed treats like she's royalty. So when you show up, trembling and oatless, she does not approve. She lunges again, not quite a kick, more like a sharp warning, as if to say, you may exist, but only barely. You lower your brush. You bow. Not sarcastically, literally. It's the only way to de escalate. Horses respond to calm body language, or at least that's what Oswin says. You're still not sure if he's full of wisdom or full of horse dung. Probably both. Back to brushing. You keep one hand on the animal, the other on the brush, eyes laser focused on flank movement. Your entire existence now revolves around reading subtle shifts in weight. A flick of the tail? Normal. Ears pinned back. Code red. That hoof lifts just 1 inch too high? It's dodge or die time. You've seen boys get kicked across stalls. One of them lost a tooth. Another forgot 3 days of his life and now talks to chickens like they're relatives. Historians still argue whether horses were trained intentionally to detect stable boy fear, but you're convinced they have a sixth sense for panic. Elsbeth calms, for now. You finish brushing her with something close to reverence and slide out of the stall like a man sneaking away from a sleeping dragon. You close the latch, whisper an apology to the universe, and vow to invent horse helmets for humans. Next up, hoof cleaning. And now, dear friend, we step into the truly cursed portion of the morning. Picking hooves is the kind of job you don't appreciate until you do it wrong once, or 7 times. You grab the iron pick, a tool designed by someone who clearly hated risks, and kneel beside Chestnut. You tap his leg gently. He lifts his hoof, or rather, he dangles it 6 inches off the ground like he's considering whether you're worthy. You cradle it, tilt it up, and begin scraping mud, manure, straw, and occasionally, things you can't identify from the grooves. He shifts his weight. You lurch. Your thumb gets pinched between his hoof and the ground. You bite your lip. Not today, pain. Not today. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Cleaning hooves wasn't just for hygiene. It was vital for the horse's survival. A stone lodged in a hoof could cause lameness, infection, or worse. And guess who got blamed if that happened? You, the boy with no title, no room, and no lawyer. Hoof number 2 goes well. Hoof number 3, less so. Chestnut steps sideways, onto your foot. He's not heavy, he's catastrophic. You bite back a shriek that bubbles up your throat like boiling stew. You can't cry, you can't scream, you just hiss like a kettle and try to wiggle your toes until sensation returns. It doesn't. Hoof number 4, flawless. Because by then, your soul has left your body. You hobble away from the stall, pick in hand, and collapse onto a bale of hay. Not to rest, never to rest, just to momentarily cease existing in 3 dimensions. You glance around. Oswin's feeding the foals. Another boy is brushing down a mare that looks like she hasn't slept since the Crusades. Everything in this place is routine, repetition, risk. The stables run on a strange energy, equal parts muscle, memory, and mild terror. And yet, you do it anyway, because no one else will. Because these animals, divine and ridiculous, rely on you. Because even though Lady Elsbeth hates you, she lets you brush her now, which honestly is a medieval form of character development. You limp over to the water buckets, all filled. Good. Except, wait, you lean in. One of them's got something floating in it. Is that a frog? You fish it out, barely suppressing a gag. It's alive. Barely. You chuck it outside, where it hops away, ungrateful and suspiciously judgmental. You refill the bucket, because here's a fringe historical tidbit for you. Stable boys were sometimes punished if an animal got sick, even if it was from something as uncontrollable as a frog doing the backstroke in the water trough. Why? Because the boy should have known better. Knew what exactly? No one says. Just better. Just you sigh and wipe your hands on your tunic. Again. You really need a new habit, and then you hear it. The crunch of boots on gravel. You look up. The nobleman is approaching, and behind him, his daughter, and behind her, Lady Elsbeth. You swallow hard. Lady Elsbeth sees you, and she does something she's never done before. She does not kick. She actually nudges your elbow. Not hard, not lovingly, just enough to say, I remember you, and I'm deciding to let you live. You don't smile. That would be weird. You just nod. And for the first time all day, your heart rate drops below panicked squirrel. The nobleman grunts something unintelligible and gestures towards the stall. You hold the door open. Lady Elsbeth walks in, gracefully. No drama, no explosions. You close the latch. The daughter says nothing, just tosses you a scrap of cloth. It's a linen handkerchief. Smells faintly of rosewater. Probably dropped from her sleeve. Probably meant to be a gesture. You blink. She turns and walks away. And in that moment, with horse spit on your sleeve and frog slime on your boot, you feel a strange sensation ripple through your ribs. Is that pride? Maybe. Just a little, until you trip over the rake and land, face first, in a pile of muck. Back to reality. You don't bleed, not this time. You do groan, though, quietly, into the straw, because rule number 4 of being a stable boy is deceptively simple and endlessly infuriating. Silence around the nobles. You roll over slowly, trying to avoid alerting anyone with a title longer than your life expectancy. Your cheek is now artfully adorned with a smear of something organic. Probably not food. Hopefully not Elsbeth's commentary on your brushing technique. You sit up. Across the courtyard, the noble girl has already forgotten you exist. She's perched side saddle on Elsbeth, braids bouncing, her voice trailing into the breeze like a flute no one asked to play. Her father, dressed in fur-trimmed sleeves and vague dissatisfaction, doesn't look back once. And that's the thing. You're not supposed to exist. You are function, not person. You are the boy who appears out of nowhere to hold a bridle, clean a mess, and disappear before the master's boots hit the cobblestone. If you speak, it must be in hushed tones. If you make a sound, it had better be horse related. And if you smile, well, once a stable boy named Marin laughed at a noble's joke. It was a polite, nervous chuckle, barely audible. He was whipped for mockery before lunch and reassigned to latrine duty by dinner. Last anyone heard, he became a monk, probably out of spite. So now you don't laugh, you don't smile, you don't even hum unless you're alone with the manure. You rise from your fall, brush yourself off, futile, and duck back inside the stables. Your shoulders instinctively hunch, not from pain, from habit. Being too tall is a visual liability. Your head might be spotted, your presence acknowledged, and that could go poorly. You once heard the steward call you that little ghost? You took it as a compliment. And yet, paradoxically, you must also be everywhere. Because if a noble wants his horse tacked at dawn and you're not within earshot, the entire household hears about it. You are expected to appear exactly when needed, like smoke or guilt or taxes. The horses understand you better. Chestnut, moody, but consistent, whinnies as you pass. You give him a pat on the neck, and he snorts approval, which is probably as close to love as a stable boy gets around here. You duck into the tack room. Now the tack room is not glamorous. It is not tidy. It is a universe of cracked leather, mildew, and endless tangled straps that all look the same at 4 a.m. You scan the shelves, praying the Lord's favorite saddle hasn't grown legs and left again. Found it. You lift it carefully. An absurdly heavy piece of craftsmanship with gold thread stitching, and, you suspect, an unreasonable sense of self worth. It's the kind of saddle that gets cleaned twice a day and has its own designated blanket while you sleep on straw. You carry it back across the courtyard, arms shaking like a sapling in a gale. You reach the mounting block just in time to see another noble approach, this one younger, flashier, a velvet doublet, and the facial expression of someone who's never once held a shovel. He sneers at you, at the mud on your boots, at your existence. He mutters something to his squire, probably about your hair, or your smell, or the fact that you dared breathe in his vicinity. And this is where the rule becomes razor edged. You can't speak. You can't defend yourself. Because stable boys don't speak to nobles unless spoken to. And even then, it better be in tones softer than a prayer, and twice as apologetic. You bow slightly, not too much, just enough. The younger noble turns away. His boots are spotless. You suspect they've never touched dirt. You wish you could say the same of your tongue, which still tastes faintly of hay dust and last week's despair. You mount the saddle. The girth is twisted, because of course it is. You adjust it quickly, fingers numb from cold and repetition. You double check the stirrups, tighten the buckles, smooth the blanket. The horse shifts. You flinch. Because one slip up, one twisted strap, that's a punishable offense. If the noble so much as feels the saddle dig wrong, you'll be blamed. The steward will call it negligence. The noble will call it treason. You call it Tuesday. And here's your mainstream historical fact of the section. In many households, especially in knightly orders, stable boys were punished for both actual mistakes and perceived ones. Their role was considered vital to maintaining noble image and readiness, but their treatment was anything but noble. Your job, essentially, is to ensure a flawless experience for someone who considers you the equivalent of a mildly useful mushroom. You check the cinch one last time, then step back, silent, still. The noble swings into the saddle. His cloak flutters. His horse tosses its mane. He doesn't thank you. Of course not. He rides off. You don't watch. You've got 8 more saddles to prep. You return to the stables, trying not to limp. Your left leg still throbs from yesterday's headbutt, courtesy of a gelding named Parsley. You hate Parsley. Parsley knows this. Your feud is mutual and ongoing. Back in the tack room, you pause. The sunlight has crept in through the slats of the wall, dust dancing in golden beams. It's quiet for a moment, peaceful, even. Then someone yells, a noblewoman's voice, shrill, sharp. She wants her pony. You're already moving. No sigh, no muttering, no delay. Because you're a stable boy, a ghost in boots, a shadow with a brush, you appear. You bow, you obey, and the world continues. Oblivious, you shuffle back into the tack room, the noblewoman's command still echoing in your ears like an unpaid debt. And now it's time for rule number 5, the one that's not written anywhere but is enforced by the universe itself. Breeches before breakfast, or in your case, horse breeches before your breakfast, which, spoiler alert, may or may not happen at all today. You squint at the assortment of bridles and blankets, trying to remember which tack belongs to Lady Cecily's pony. It's the smallest one, made of embroidered leather and an absurd amount of lace. You'd think it was designed for a noble infant's tea party, not an actual animal capable of kicking you in the throat. Kicking. You grab the gear, gently place it over your arm like it's made of spun gold, because if you drop it, you will be lectured by the steward until your soul tries to escape, and you step outside toward the far stall. The pony, Buttercup, is already staring at you, like she knows you skipped brushing her yesterday. You'd argue, but honestly, she's not wrong. You click your tongue softly. She doesn't move. You try again, this time with a whisper. Come on, princess. She turns around and presents her rear. Classic. You inch closer with the bit. She steps back. You step forward. She turns. You twist. It's a medieval tango, minus the music, and plus a rising sense of personal failure. Eventually, after much negotiation involving a sugar cube you probably weren't supposed to take from the kitchen, Buttercup allows you to slip the bridle on. You quickly check her hooves, mercifully clean, and slide the blanket and saddle into place with the finesse of someone who's done this in their sleep. Which, in fairness, you kind of have. As you tighten the girth, your stomach growls audibly, loud enough that Buttercup turns to look at you, ears swiveling like tiny judgmental satellites. Right, food. You haven't had any. Again. And this is the part of stable life no bard sings about. You feed the animals. You prep the tack. You clean the stalls. But you do not eat until everyone with 4 legs and noble bloodlines has been thoroughly pampered. That includes the chickens. The chickens have likely pecked through their morning grains while you were dodging hooves. Even the manor cats are probably licking cream from pewter bowls while you're out here gnawing on your own sense of duty. Historically, it wasn't uncommon for stable workers to be fed last, or only once daily, depending on their standing in the household. And as the bottom of the ladder, you sometimes feel like you've fallen off the ladder entirely. You glance toward the kitchen windows across the courtyard. No smoke, no smell, no hope. You consider sneaking in for a crust of bread. Just a heel. Something to chew that isn't straw, accidentally stuck between your teeth since sunrise. But then you remember last week. That boy, Martin, maybe, who got caught filching a carrot meant for the stew. The cook hit him with a ladle. The steward added a whipping, and now Martin limps like a donkey on stilts. So no, no bread. You pull Buttercup's reins and lead her outside, where Lady Cecily waits in a dress the color of disapproval. She doesn't acknowledge you, of course, just flicks her fingers toward the mounting block. Her nursemaid lifts her into the saddle. Cecily sits like someone born in a cradle shaped like a throne. Buttercup stands motionless, likely terrified of sneezing wrong and being exiled. Cecily finally glances at you. You missed a braid, she says, not kindly. You look at the pony's mane. She's right. One small braid near the base is loose, possibly from rolling, possibly from spite. You nod, silently fix it, and step back without a word. This is a delicate dance. Stable boys aren't allowed to speak to noble girls unless asked a direct question, and sometimes not even then. Too familiar, and you're insolent. Too cold, and you're ungrateful. Too perfect, and you might be reassigned out of sheer suspicion. So you become a mirror, a silent presence, a brushstroke in someone else's portrait. Lady Cecily gives a faint nod of approval, which for her is the emotional equivalent of a standing ovation. She clicks her tongue. Buttercup trots off. You exhale. And then, finally, you hear it. A bell. Not the manor bell, not the chapel, the kitchen bell. It rings twice. That means leftovers. You don't wait. You sprint. You don't care if it's allowed. You don't care if you'll be yelled at later. You run like a man chasing his last hope. Inside the back kitchen, the scullion barely looks up. He's too busy chopping onions like they insulted his family. But beside him, in a wooden bowl, is the answer to your prayers. Porridge, cold, watery, barely edible. You nearly cry. You grab the spoon and eat like you've never met food before, which frankly is accurate. It tastes like wood and sadness, but also like survival. Oswin arrives beside you, panting. They left us the burnt bits, he says, spooning the charred bottom from the pot with alarming enthusiasm. Luxury, you reply mouthful. And for a moment, you both sit, side by side, stable boys, in silence, eating porridge from a cracked bowl like it's a royal banquet. A fly lands on your arm. You flick it away. It returns. You sigh. Still better than nothing. Then, just as you're licking the spoon, someone yells from the courtyard. Where's the boy? You freeze. Oswin freezes. You both glance at each other, the spoon still in your mouth. And just like that, breakfast is over. You toss the bowl, wipe your mouth, and jog back toward the stables. Back to the horses. Back to the dirt. Back to the breeches. Still no second breakfast in sight. You're halfway across the yard. Porridge clinging to your ribs like it's afraid of abandonment. When the steward catches your eye. Shooing detail, he growls like it's a life sentence. And just like that, rule number 6 gallops into your life with the enthusiasm of a startled donkey. Grease the hooves, not the ego. Shoeing a horse is one of those medieval marvels that sounds noble when sung about in tavern ballads. But the truth? It's sweat, smoke, and soot, with just a hint of toe trauma. You shuffle toward the forge, stomach flipping from the memory of that one time a hot horseshoe landed in your lap. You still walk funny on cold days. The farrier is already waiting. He's a huge man, shaped like a bread oven, arms like barrels, and patience thinner than your breakfast gruel. His name is Ham. That's not short for anything. It's just Ham. You suspect it's because he's mostly composed of it. Hold the leg, he grunts, not looking at you. You obey. The horse is a stallion, coal black, muscles coiled like ropes soaked in vinegar. You've met this one before. His name is Valor, though you've personally filed him under hoof with a grudge. He doesn't like the forge. He doesn't like smoke. He especially doesn't like you. You wrap your arms around his leg, just under the fetlock, and lift. Valor does not approve. He yanks. You hold. He kicks. You flinch but don't let go, because letting go means the farrier has to start over. And when Ham has to start over, things get thrown. You've seen him lob a pair of tongs clear over the stable roof. The chicken still hasn't recovered. Ham brings the shoe from the fire. It glows, red, hissing, malevolent, like it was forged by someone who hates toes. He fits it to the hoof. The sizzle is immediate. The smell? Worse than burnt hair. Worse than week-old cabbage stew. Worse than anything. Your eyes water. Valor shifts again. Hold him, Ham grunts. I am, you whisper, but not loud enough to be heard. He hammers the nails through the hoof wall. Precisely, brutally, loudly. You wince with every strike. Valor doesn't. Probably because he's fantasizing about kicking your lungs. And here's the historical twist for today. Farriers were respected tradesmen, but their assistants, boys like you, were expendable. They were often blamed if a horse threw a shoe, even though they had nothing to do with the shaping or fitting. You're just the meat cushion holding the leg. Ham finishes one hoof. Next, he says. You switch sides. This time, Valor doesn't fight. He's tired. Or plotting. You're not sure which is worse. Ham works quickly, efficiently. There's an art to it, you'll admit. He shapes iron like it's dough, his fingers nimbler than his personality suggests. The fire roars behind him. You sweat through your tunic. Midway through the third hoof, Ham glances at you. You ever think about learning this trade? You blink. Sir? Better than mucking. Pays more. Girls like a farrier. You nod slowly, unsure whether that last part is a threat, a promise, or a strange rural proverb. Then Ham adds, You'd need hands like bricks and patience, like a saint. You look down at your hands, thin, cracked, blistered. They're halfway there. You hold the hoof a little tighter. The last shoe goes on without incident. Ham dunks the hot iron into water with a violent hiss. Steam erupts, curling around you like ghost smoke. You cough once, then twice, and step back. Valor snorts. You let go of the leg. He doesn't kick you, which feels suspicious. You lead him back to his stall, walking sideways, eyes on his ears, just in case he decides to wait until you think you're safe before delivering the blow. Inside the stable, you tie him up and lean against the wall for a moment. That's when you see your boot, your missing boot, the one that vanished 2 days ago. It's in the corner, half chewed, covered in what can only be described as goat-based disrespect. You sigh. Somewhere behind you, Parsley bleats. Of course it was Parsley. You retrieve the boot, inspect the damage, and decide it's still wearable. If you redefine wearable to mean technically still boot-shaped, you shove it on anyway. Your reward? A squelch. Something wet inside. Best not to investigate. Back to work. Next on the list, oiling the saddles. Because even though you've just endured molten metal, you're still expected to shine leather until it reflects your regret. You fetch the oil, a cloth, and your dwindling will to live. Each saddle takes 20 minutes. You scrub, rub, buff. Again and again. Your arms ache. Your shoulders scream. Your fingers cramp into little claws of anguish. But you keep going. Because one smudge, one streak, that's a scolding. Or worse, double duty. You start humming softly. A lullaby you half remember from somewhere. Or maybe you made it up. The rhythm helps. So does pretending the saddles are noble faces you're allowed to punch, gently. As you finish the final saddle, a shaft of sunlight breaks through the stable door. It catches the polished leather, a perfect gleam, almost enough to make you proud. Then the steward walks in, grunts, runs a single finger across the surface, finds a fleck of dust, and says, "Do it again." You don't scream, you just nod, and grab the cloth, because in the world of stable boys, there is no such thing as done, only not yet yelled at. The hayloft groans under your weight as you climb the ladder, each rung creaking like it's seconds from betrayal. You've been sent up here to fetch fresh straw for the stalls, which, according to the steward, is urgently required. You suspect that means the Lord's horse sneezed once. You duck your head and crawl through the low beams, the air thick with dust and the scent of old grass. Sunlight filters through slats in golden ribbons, catching floating flecks that look almost magical, until one goes straight up your nose and triggers a sneeze, so violent you nearly tumble backward. And now comes rule number 7. No sudden moves in the hayloft, because you're not alone up here. The loft is shared territory, by you, by other boys, and by roughly 200 rats who claim squatters' rights. Somewhere in the corner, a family of them is having a conference. They pause mid-squeak as you enter, all twitchy noses and side-eye. One of them has a limp. You call him Sir Nibbles. You nod at him in greeting. He doesn't respond. Rude. You crawl forward, navigating between piles of straw like you're in some kind of itchy maze. The hay is dry, sharp, and oddly judgmental. You tug at a clean bundle and roll it toward the trap door. The goal is to drop it neatly to the floor below without knocking over the bucket of oats, the lantern, or the cat, who may or may not be sleeping up here again. You freeze. There's movement in the far corner. Not a rat, not a cat, something larger, someone larger. You squint. Ah, romance. Two of the manor's maids are pressed together in the shadows, whispering and giggling in ways that are definitely not hay-related. You immediately pivot your eyes to the nearest beam and pretend you've never seen a human in your life, because here's a forbidden truth of stable life. The hayloft isn't just for storage. It's also the manor's worst-kept secret for secret keeping. Meetings, hushed talks, illicit snacks, the occasional stolen kiss. This loft has heard more confessions than the chapel. Historians still argue whether haylofts were intentionally used for covert rendezvous or just accidentally excellent at hosting them. Either way, you've stumbled into a real, hay-scratchy soap opera. You try not to breathe, or blink, or sneeze again. Eventually, the girls shuffle off, giggling down the opposite ladder, leaving behind a ribbon, a whisper of perfume, and the lingering tension of you saw nothing. You grab the hay bale, now feeling slightly unclean, and drag it toward the trap door. You lower it slowly, carefully, no sudden movements, because if you drop this thing too fast, it might explode across the stable floor like a sneezy hedgehog. Or worse, startle a horse. You glance down. Below, Oswin waits. Barely. He's leaning against a rake like it's a chaise lounge, eyes half shut. You clear your throat softly. He startles, stares up, then frowns. What took you so long? You making friends with the spiders? Yes, you were. You drop the hay bale. It lands with a solid whoomp. Oswin grunts and starts dragging it to stall 3. You descend the ladder, boots catching once, nearly tumbling. Again. The loft, despite being a dust-filled nightmare, is one of the only places where you can almost vanish for a minute. Sometimes you sneak up there just to breathe without a hoof nearby, but never too long. The steward has a sixth sense for laziness. You reach the floor again. Your hands are scratched. Your hair now holds at least 4 kinds of hayseed, 1 small twig, and the shattered remains of your dignity. Back to the stalls, Oswin mutters. You nod and help spread the new bedding. It's a little ridiculous when you think about it. All this effort so a horse doesn't have to sleep on slightly older hay. But nobles are picky, and so, apparently, are their animals. You move to the next stall. Chestnut eyes you suspiciously. You freeze. Easy, you whisper. You fluff the new bedding with all the enthusiasm of a man folding royal linens. Chestnut snorts, then proceeds to immediately poop on your freshly spread straw. Perfect. You grab the rake. Again. Outside, the sky has fully brightened. It's maybe mid morning, though you've lost all sense of time. The sun peeks through the stable door, catching bits of dust in the air. It's warm for a moment, almost pleasant, and then, a thud above, the hayloft. Something fell. You glance up. A book. A tiny leather-bound book. You pick it up. No title, no name. You flip through it. Drawings. Not bad ones. Not horses, not people. Birds. Trees. Doodles. Notes about constellations. A recipe for blackberry tea. It's written in a looping hand. Not like the clunky scrawl most boys have. Definitely not Oswin. You look around, but no one else is near. The book smells faintly of lavender and ink. You slip it into your tunic. You'll return it, eventually. Or maybe just read a few more pages first. Because in this life of mud, hooves, and endless shoveling, a scrap of someone else's thoughts feels like finding a warm loaf in a pile of cold, wet turnips. You go back to work, but now, the hayloft isn't just straw and rats. It's a secret place. A place of whispers and ribbons and books full of stars. And maybe, just maybe, not all rules are meant to be followed. The book burns a small warm square against your chest as you rake. It's not guilt, yet. It's more like curiosity wrapped in contraband, the kind that makes your heart thump a little louder every time someone walks too close, like you're hiding a royal jewel instead of someone's doodles and a tea recipe. You toss another rakeful of straw into stall 5 and try to focus, but your brain keeps drifting back to the tiny constellation sketch on page 3. Did someone in this place once have the time, know the freedom, to just lie on their back and look at the stars? Must be nice. That thought leads directly to rule number 8, which nobody says out loud, but every stable boy learns before their first winter. No dreaming on duty. You shake the image of the stars from your head and return to the far more grounded, far less celestial task of fixing a snapped stall latch. It's the third one this week. Either the horses are conspiring or the blacksmith is selling pre-snapped wood again. You crouch down with a borrowed mallet, balancing the splintered iron loop in one hand while hammering with the other. The tool is heavy, your fingers stiff, and every time you strike, the shock travels up your arm and settles in your teeth. Halfway through, the steward passes by. He pauses. He doesn't say anything. He just raises an eyebrow, which is worse than yelling. You instantly double your hammering speed, nearly smack your thumb in the process, and finish the job with a final clumsy knock. The latch clinks into place. He continues walking. You exhale. See, the steward believes in tough love, minus the love. His eyes are everywhere. His ears, sharper than a hawk's. And if you think you're being clever, sneaking a bite of carrot, pausing for a breath, glancing at the clouds, he will appear like a vengeful fog and assign you 2 more stalls. Historians still debate whether medieval estate stewards were loyal household managers or passive-aggressive tyrants with excellent posture. Yours? Definitely the latter. You step back from the stall and flex your wrist. It pops. Twice. You're pretty sure that's not normal, but at this point, everything about your body feels held together by hay dust and sheer spite. Time for grooming round 2. The mid-morning horses are scheduled for light rides. That means brushing, mane checks, hoof cleaning, again, and ensuring not a single burr or tangled tail knot remains, because noble bottoms do not tolerate itchy rides. You grab the curry comb and head for the stallion named Bramble. He's named after a thorn bush and behaves like one. He pins his ears back the moment you enter. You hold up your hands like a hostage negotiator. Easy. I'm just here to make you prettier than the Duke's wig. He doesn't laugh. You get to work. The brushing is rhythmic, almost meditative. Circles over his flank, down the leg, across the barrel. You start to relax. His breathing matches yours until your brush hits something buried deep in his mane. You pause. A knot, not a small one. This is a full-blown dreadlock situation, tangled with twigs, dried mud, and what may or may not be half a dead beetle. You reach for the main comb and begin the delicate operation known as detangling while keeping your internal organs intact. Every pull risks a flinch. Every flinch risks a kick. You talk to him softly. Hey now, you've rolled in worse. Remember the cabbage incident? He flicks an ear. A small mercy. It takes 10 minutes and most of your willpower, but the knot comes free. You hold it up like a defeated monster, then toss it into the muck pile behind you. As you continue brushing, your mind wanders again to the book, to the sketches, to the word written above one of the stars, Andromeda. You've never heard it before. You don't know what it means, but it sounds important, like a spell or a name from a song long forgotten. It's the kind of word that doesn't belong to the world of stalls and bridles and hoof picks. You wish you could ask someone, but who? Oswin thinks philosophy is a kind of sausage. And the steward? You'd sooner trust a goat with a goblet. So you tuck the word away, next to your ribs, where the book still rests. After Bramble, it's Parsley's turn. You approach him with the caution of a man inspecting a very nervous firework. He snorts. You snort back. He farts. You lose. You brush him anyway, out of duty, and some twisted version of affection. He's a menace, but he's your menace. Once the grooming is done, you step outside for water duty. Each trough must be scrubbed, rinsed, and refilled. You grab the bucket, still dented from when you tripped over it last Tuesday, and head toward the well. The path is slippery. You slip. Again. You fall flat on your back, the bucket clattering away like it's trying to escape employment. Your head hits the ground. Not hard, but enough to make you see stars. Not the real kind. The cartoon kind, and then strangely, real ones do appear. Not above you. Those are blocked by stable beams, but behind your eyes, as if your brain has decided to gift you a private sky. Just for a second. Andromeda. There it is again. You sit up slowly, rub your temples, and groan. You're tired. Tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. Tired in your soul. You collect the bucket, refill the trough, and splash water on your face. It's cold. It helps. Just a little. The horses nicker softly behind you. The air smells of hay, sweat, and late morning heat. And for a moment, you wonder what it would be like to ride away. Not as a servant, not as a ghost, but as someone who mattered. Someone who followed stars, not stall assignments. But dreaming is dangerous. So you shoulder the bucket, push the thought down, and head back inside. Back to the rules. Back to the rake. Back to duty. Still, in your chest, Andromeda glows faintly. You don't know what it is, but you're starting to want to find out. The noon bell rings. Technically, it tolls twice. Once for the Manor's dining hour, and once for the rest of you to remember you're not invited. You pause by the stable door, eyes following a scullion dashing across the courtyard with a pie so golden it could double as currency. You don't even try to smell it. That would be cruel. Instead, you chew a stale oat kernel you found in your tunic pocket. Not food, not even close. But rule number 9 doesn't care. Don't beg, don't ask, don't expect. You're a stable boy, not a guest, not a worker with rights, just there, like moss on a well, necessary but unwanted. You glance at Oswin. He's sitting cross legged on an upturned bucket, nibbling what looks suspiciously like a peeled onion. Lunch? You ask. He shrugs. Found it under the chopping table. Might be 2 days old. Nice. He offers half. You take it. Bite. Regret. Not too bad, you lie, your eyes watering. He nods, eyes watering too, and mutters, still better than squirrel. You both chew in silence, sharing the culinary equivalent of a minor tragedy. Once the meal ends, it's time for tack maintenance. Again. Because even though you scrubbed those saddles this morning, the steward now claims they smell wrong. You suspect he's just trying to train your nose for phantom offenses. You gather the bridles, bits, and girths and lay them on the tack bench, like puzzle pieces no one enjoys solving, brushing metal, polishing leather, relacing cracked straps. You settle into the rhythm, your hands working faster than your thoughts, which is useful because thinking too long about how your life revolves around horse sweat can lead to an existential spiral. And you've already had one of those this week. Still, amidst the monotonous rub of cloth on bridle, your fingers itch. Not from grime, from curiosity, from the book. You glance around, no one nearby. The farrier's in the forge. Oswin's fallen asleep with his chin on a saddle. The steward is probably off terrorizing the buttermaid. You slip the book from your tunic, just a peek. The next page has a drawing of a crescent moon. Below it, a note. Sleep comes easiest when stars are named aloud. Weird, but oddly comforting. You flip again. A recipe for something called dream syrup. Lavender steeped in goat's milk and honey. Sounds fake. Sounds lovely. You keep reading. It's not just drawings. It's thoughts. Observations. Someone recording the world through a quieter lens. Not chores. Not orders. Just wonder. And scribbles. Swallows return to the same beam each spring. How do they know? You smile. Then you freeze. Footsteps. You slam the book shut and shove it into the tack trunk. Just in time. The steward appears, flanked by 2 hounds and his usual cloud of disapproval. Why is Oswin sleeping? You glance at the boy, still drooling on a saddle. He's praying? The steward stares. You stare. Oswin snorts, mutters something about plums, and slides off the bucket entirely. You wince. The steward mutters, useless, and strides off, dogs in tow. Crisis narrowly avoided. You retrieve the book, slip it back into your tunic. You shouldn't keep it. You know that. But giving it up now would feel like removing a splinter you've grown fond of. Instead, you get back to polishing. Another hour passes. At some point, a merchant arrives. Big cloak, bigger voice. He's here to sell spices, he says, though most of it looks like dyed sawdust. Still, the manor's cook rushes out, bartering furiously over what may or may not be actual cinnamon. You and Oswin watch from a distance. Think cinnamon tastes good? He asks. You shrug. Probably like warm hay. He frowns. That's just hay. You both stare at the merchant's mule. It has better shoes than either of you. Then something shifts. A figure you don't recognize walks past the stable gate. Not a noble, not a servant, a traveler. Ragged cloak, sharp eyes, a pack of books tied with string. He looks straight at you, just for a second. Then he smiles, briefly, and keeps walking. Who was that? You whisper. Oswin shrugs. Scholar? Minstrel? Fugitive? You nod, but something about that smile lingers. It wasn't mocking or dismissive. It was familiar, like he saw something in you. A seed, maybe. Not yet grown, but there. And suddenly, it hits you. There are other lives out there, lives not filled with saddles and muck and cold onion lunches. You look at the tack, at the stable, at the sky. It's still daylight, still hours before rest. But something stirs in your ribs, a restlessness, a yearning, not dangerous yet, but growing. You tuck the book deeper into your tunic and wonder, what if you wrote in it? What if your life, mud soaked, overlooked, whispered, was worth a few scribbles too? You steal a bit of charcoal from the edge of the forge. Not a full piece. That would be suspicious. Just a sliver. Just enough. You tuck it into the spine of the book, careful not to smudge the existing sketches. Your fingers shake slightly. You've never written anything before. Not truly. Not unless you count scrawling your name in dust on the back of a mule during last year's solstice, which Oswin promptly turned into a drawing of something unmentionable. This is different. This is yours. You flip to a blank page tucked near the middle. The parchment is coarse, uneven, as if it's been repurposed from a failed kitchen ledger. You press the charcoal gently and write, Chestnut, let me brush him today without trying to murder me. I think that counts as friendship. It's not elegant, but it's honest. You stare at it for a moment, oddly proud. Then quietly, you add a second line. I think the stars have secrets. I don't know how to ask them yet. You shut the book quickly, heart fluttering like a nervous hen. Someone's coming. It's not the steward. It's worse. The mistress of the manor, Lady Beatrice. She glides past the stable gate, robes whispering behind her, eyes sharp enough to slice bread. She rarely comes near the stables. The scent of manure doesn't match her embroidery, but today she stops, looks directly at you. You bow so fast your spine protests. You're suddenly aware of every patch on your tunic, every speck of dirt under your nails, the suspicious bulge in your shirt where the book hides. She says nothing, just lifts an eyebrow. Behind her, a servant leads out a palfrey, a gentle mare with silk ribbons braided through its mane. The lady mounts without aid, posture regal, expression unreadable. Then she says, without looking at you, brush the mare's tail properly next time. You nod, still bent in half. She rides off. You exhale. Oswin appears behind you. Did she notice the... Nope. She looked at you like she could smell your thoughts. You nod. Yep. Did you brush the tail? Not sort of. He winces. You're brave. I'm stupid. Same thing around here. You both return to work, but your mind stays with the book, the writing, the strange sense that, for the first time, you're not just reacting, you're recording. And that leads us to rule number 10, the one nobody tells you because it sounds too hopeful. If you write your story, someone might read it. You pause to think about that, then promptly dismiss it. No one cares about stable boys, do they? Your next chore is repairing a fence post out near the paddock. Someone's mule decided it was edible. You lug the tools out across the yard, passing the kitchens, where warm bread is cooling on the windowsill, like a fairy tale designed to punish you. Osmond follows, dragging a wooden slat and muttering about splinters. As you work, hammering a new board into the frame, you spot something glinting in the grass. You kneel, brush it aside. A brooch, not noble, not expensive, homemade, carved wood, shaped like a star, tied with twine. You look around. No one's nearby. You pocket it. Another secret. You finish the repair in silence. The wind picks up, rustling the leaves, sending a whisper through the trees like a language just beyond your reach. The paddock smells of grass and horse sweat. The sun is beginning to tilt westward. Evening is creeping in. That means feeding time. Again, you gather the feed buckets, start mixing the oats, and chop carrots and whatever the cook begrudgingly handed over from the scraps. Oswin handles the grain. Together, it becomes a strange ballet of scooping, pouring, and dodging impatient muzzles. One by one, the horses eat. You watch them, oddly envious. They don't have to pretend. They snort when annoyed, bite when displeased, kick when cornered. No formal bows, no fake smiles. You, on the other hand, are a shapeshifter, silent in front of nobles, efficient under the steward, funny with Oswin, invisible to the world. And slowly, you begin to realize you've been everyone but yourself. What is yourself? You reach into your tunic, thumb the corner of the book. Maybe that's how you'll find out. After feeding, it's stall time again. You rake, you shovel. You nearly step in something you hope was once food. And then, blessedly, the steward announces that the evening inspection is postponed. A miracle, which means free time. You and Oswin exchange glances. He whispers, "Hayloft." You nod. You climb quickly. The air cooler now. Less dusty. More possible. Oswin flops down on a pile of straw and immediately starts making bird noises for no discernible reason. You pull out the book. He notices. "That's not yours," he says. "I know. You're writing in it." "I know." He leans over. You let him see. He reads the bit about Chestnut, grins. Then, after a long pause, "Write something about me." You blink. "Like what?" He thinks. "I'm very handsome and brave and made entirely of roast goose." You snort. "Serious or not at all?" "Fine." He picks at a straw. "Say, I have the best chicken impression this side of the kingdom." You write it down, word for word. Then add, "He's the only friend I've ever had who'd split a raw onion like it was a treasure." Oswin goes quiet, then nods. The wind hums through the slats. The sun dips lower, and for the first time in a long time, you feel something that isn't fatigue or hunger or fear. You feel seen. The quiet doesn't last. Of course it doesn't. You're halfway through doodling a deeply unflattering caricature of Parsley the goat. You've given him a monocle for flair when a scream echoes from the courtyard below. Not a panicked scream, not noble distress. This is the kind of yell that only means one thing. A horse has gotten loose. You and Oswin exchange a look, a blend of dread, adrenaline, and "please let it not be our fault," before launching into motion. You descend the hayloft ladder in record time. Oswin jumps, lands with a grunt and a very ungraceful tumble. You burst into the yard, and there she is, Elspeth. The mare, the tempest in hooves. She's galloping through the herb garden like she owns it, trailing pieces of rope and wild-eyed dignity. She looks delighted. You do not. The cook is screaming. A noble child is crying. The steward is marching toward the chaos with a look that can only be described as involuntary funeral planning. And all eyes turn to you, because of course they do. You are the stable boy. This is your circus. And that is very much your horse. Which brings us to rule number 11. Clean the tack like your life depends on it. Because sometimes it does. Earlier this morning, before the porridge, before the onion, you were in charge of Elsbeth's bridle. It looked fine. You thought it was fine. But if she got loose, if the strap snapped, you groan. Because here's the thing. When a noble's horse goes rogue, the assumption is never, perhaps the horse had opinions. It's who forgot to buckle the throat latch. You sprint. Oswin flanks left. You cut right. Elsbeth thunders toward the main gate. A servant tries to intercept. She sidesteps with the grace of a dancer and barrels through a basket of laundry like it's a hedge maze in a dream sequence. Oswin reaches for her reins. She ducks. You dive, arms outstretched, and catch air. You hit the ground. Again. She clips your shoulder with a rear hoof on the way past. Not a kick, more like a memo. You hiss in pain, but roll quickly, dodging further commentary from her iron-shod opinions. Finally, after a second pass through the basal, she slows. Out of boredom? Spite? Who knows? You approach slowly, gently. Whisper her name. She snorts, but she doesn't bolt. You reach for the frayed strap dangling from her halter. It's snapped clean, not worn, not chewed, just failed. You exhale. Not your fault. But that won't matter. You guide her back to the paddock, patting her neck, murmuring sweet nonsense like, "Please don't ruin my life." She nuzzles your sleeve, unhelpfully. The steward appears. His boots are wet, his brow thunderous. He surveys the scene, the trampled garden, the traumatized herbs, the rope in your hand. What happened? You hold up the strap. It broke. He stares. You stare. Oswin wheezes in the background. Finally, the steward sighs. Fix it. Then report to the forge. You nod. He walks away. You and Oswin collapse against the fence. Well, he says between gasps, that wasn't the worst one. You blink. There was a worse one? Oh yeah. Last year, a pony got into the chapel, ate part of a hymn book. Father Dunstan cried. You nod slowly. That actually explains a lot about him. Oswin grins. You both laugh. Quiet, wheezy, slightly hysterical. Then you rise, sling the ruined tack over your shoulder, and limp toward the forge. Because in this life, accidents aren't just inconvenient. They're dangerous. One misbuckle, one cracked stirrup, one unpolished girth, that's not just a blemish. It's a punishable offense. In noble households, especially during wartime, horse equipment wasn't just utilitarian, it was sacred. A knight thrown from a saddle in battle might blame the tack, might blame the boy who prepped it, and punishment followed swiftly. There are records, though rarely sung about, of stable boys losing fingers. Not in accidents, as discipline, so you learn to polish, to double check every stitch, to know the difference between functional and flawless. You arrive at the forge. Ham is already hammering something into oblivion. Sparks fly like fireflies with anger issues. You hold out the broken bridle. He squints. Snapped, huh? You nod. He grunts, takes it, and starts working without further comment. While he works, you clean. The anvil, the clamps. The leftover nails scattered like metallic breadcrumbs. It's hot in here, unbearably so. The air thick with smoke and sweat, and the iron tang of burnt everything. Your shirt sticks to your back. Your breath feels heavy. You daydream about snow and cold water and not being conscious. Ham finally finishes, hands you the repaired bridle. Stronger now, won't snap again unless the mare becomes a dragon. You mutter a thank you and head out. You return to Elsbeth's stall. Reattach the gear. Check every strap twice. She flicks her tail and watches you like she's considering a sequel. No, you whisper. Just no. You finish, step out, and lean against the wall. Your shoulder still aches from earlier, but inside your tunic, the book is safe. Later tonight, you'll write this down. Not the pain, not the punishment. The part where you laughed, where Oswin wheezed like a dying bellows, where, for a brief moment, the job didn't win. Because that's the secret to surviving this life. You don't wait for happiness. You snatch it in passing, like a horse on the loose, charging through your day. You're supposed to be cleaning the buckets. That's the official task on the steward's daily ledger. Water vessels, scrubbed before supper. It sounds simple, almost pastoral. Something out of a painting, perhaps. A boy, a wooden pail, the golden light of evening. In reality, it's cold water, algae slime, and the lingering odor of things that definitely used to be oats, but have now evolved into something else entirely, possibly sentient. You tip over the first bucket. It lets out a splorch that sounds vaguely accusatory. Oswin's somewhere nearby, tasked with cleaning the outer trough. Judging by the rhythmic splashing and off-key humming, he's either doing a fine job or bathing himself again. You hope it's the first. You strongly suspect the second. And so begins rule number 12. If it smells worse than the pigsty, blame the other boy. This rule is not about justice. It's about survival. If something goes awry, if a horse drinks from a green-tinged pail and develops a rash, if the Lord Spaniel laps from the wrong bucket and immediately vomits, it's your job to ensure the steward hears the words. Oswin said it was clean. You scrub. The sun is beginning to dip, casting long shadows across the yard. The air has cooled, thank the saints. A breeze stirs the hay, rustling the edges of reality into something just shy of peaceful, until Parsley appears. Covered in flour, you blink. He blinks back, entirely unapologetic. Oswin, you call. Did you? Nope, he yells before you even finish. Parsley trots smugly across the yard, trailing a white powdery cloud like a ghostly sheep. You sigh. The kitchen must have left the grain sack unattended. Again, you set down your brush and intercept the goat. He dodges. You lunge. He ducks under the workbench and emerges chewing what is unmistakably a parchment scroll. You freeze. Not just any scroll, a delivery inventory. A sealed one. This is what historians refer to as a career-ending snack. You snatch it from his mouth and inspect the damage, teeth marks, slobber, and the unmistakable scent of flour goat. You sigh. Again, Rule 13 should be never trust anything with hooves and ambition, you mutter, stuffing the damp scroll into your belt and herding Parsley toward his pen. He resists. You persist. Eventually you win, though barely. He headbutts your shin in protest before wandering off to terrorize a mouse. You return to the buckets. Scrub harder. Scrub like your life depends on it. Because, depending on what's on that scroll, it might. And while your arms work, your mind wanders, again, to the book. You haven't written since morning. Haven't had a moment to stop, breathe, and be. You dry your hands on your tunic and pull the journal from your belt. It's warm, comforting. You flip it open, find your page, and write. Look, Parsley ate the delivery record. Again, I fear he may be trying to unionize. You pause, then write more. I saw a beetle today. Its back was gold, like polished brass. It looked like something a noble might wear on a brooch. I wonder if anyone else noticed. Another pause. The sun hit the water trough just right, and for a second it looked like the ocean I've never seen. You close the book, smile. There's something deeply rebellious about writing observations that have no value to the people in charge. No purpose, no coin, just thoughts. Things you noticed. Things that mattered only to you. You slip it away just as Oswin approaches, dripping water and possibly treason. The trough's clean, he announces. And also I dropped a boot in it. You glance down. Indeed. One of his boots squelches wetly as he walks. The other? Missing. You decide not to ask. Instead, you both sit on the fence rail, tired, quiet. The sky deepens from blue to bruised orange. The chickens settle down. The horses shift in their stalls. One neighs softly, as if muttering in its sleep. Oswin breaks the silence. Do you ever think about leaving? You raise an eyebrow. Leaving where? Here, stable, manor, all of it. You shrug. And go where? He thinks. I don't know. Somewhere with less hay in my underpants. You both laugh, but it's the kind of laugh that holds more weight than air, a laugh that could, if ignored, turn into something sharp. You've thought about leaving. Of course you have. But where do you go when your only skills are hoof related? When your education consists of knot tying, bucket lugging, and an impressive knowledge of which hay bales the rats prefer? Still you say, maybe, one day. Oswin nods. We should go together, you and me, and Parsley, if he agrees not to eat anything important. He won't. Then we leave him behind. He can inherit the manor. The image makes you snort. Parsley, lord of the estate, signing edicts with his hoof, kicking anyone who dares question his authority. Honestly, it tracks. The evening bell rings. Time to sweep the yard. You hop down, legs sore, fingers aching. Oswin groans as he retrieves the broom. You both begin the final task of the day. Not glamorous, not exciting, but there's comfort in the repetition, in the rhythm of broom against dirt, in the slow closing of the day. And as the sky fades to navy and the stars begin their cautious blinking, you glance up. You whisper their names, the ones from the book. Andromeda, Cassiopeia, Orion. The wind shifts. You smile. Because maybe the stars aren't just up there. Maybe somehow they're inside you too, waiting. Sweeping the yard in the evening is the closest you ever come to meditation. The broom makes a steady, scratchy rhythm across the cobblestones, like a lullaby for dirt. Bits of straw, horsehair, and something that might once have been a turnip are pushed into neat little piles, only to be scattered again by the wind or Oswin's feet or Parsley's persistent interference. You sweep anyway, because that's rule number 13. If you didn't sweep it, it will be blamed on you anyway. You hear the words often, not from anyone in particular, but from the collective wisdom of every boy who came before you. They're scratched into beams, whispered during bucket scrubbing, and etched into the way you move through the world. Do more than they see, fix more than they break. The steward doesn't inspect, he notices. Which is worse? You finish the front yard. Oswin handles the rear. You pass by each other like sleepy ghosts, brooms dragging behind. And somewhere near the compost heap, you find it. A feather, not an ordinary one. It's dark blue, almost black, with a shimmer that catches the twilight like oil on water. You pick it up, careful not to crush the barbs. It's long, raven, maybe, or something rarer. You twirl it in your fingers. It's beautiful, and it's going into the book. Back in the loft, you press it gently between two pages, right beside the paragraph about Parsley's attempted scroll-eating rebellion. It adds a kind of dignity to the absurdity. Oswin climbs up behind you, carrying a crust of bread like it's an heirloom. Found this near the compost, he says. Don't ask how long it's been there. You raise an eyebrow. He breaks it in half, offers you the slightly less composty half. You take it. It tastes earthy, but warm. You eat in silence, watching the last of the daylight vanish behind the trees. From this angle, the manor looks almost peaceful. The rooftops framed by purple sky, lanterns glowing soft yellow in the hall windows. If you squint hard enough, you can almost believe it's a friendly place. Almost. Below, the stables creak in the wind. The horses shift in their stalls. Somewhere, an owl calls. And for a moment, the world feels like a story. You open the book again. This time, not to write, just to read. You flip back to a sketch you'd skimmed before. A small cluster of trees, drawn with such detail that you can almost feel the bark beneath your fingers. There's a note in the margin. Somewhere just beyond these trees is something that doesn't hurt. You reread that line 3 times. Oswin peers over your shoulder. What's that mean? You shrug. I don't know, but I think I'd like to find out. He nods slowly, then gestures to the sketch. You think that's the woods near the creek or the ones behind the chapel? You pause. I think it might not be here at all. The wind whistles through the slats. Your candle flickers. You feel a chill, not from cold, but from the weight of the thought you've just spoken. Because if the place that doesn't hurt isn't here, maybe it's somewhere else. Maybe it's anywhere else. Historians still debate how often medieval servants ran away and whether they did so for freedom or desperation. But you know that some did. You've heard the stories. The girl who disappeared into the hills, the boy who became a minstrel, the apprentice who vanished after a fire and was never mentioned again. Maybe they found it. That place, the one that doesn't hurt. Oswin shifts beside you. We should mark our own stars. You blink. What? In the book. Make up our own constellations. Name them after things we know. You smile. Like the great goat? Yes, and the stable spoon. And the sleeping steward. Definitely that one. You reach for the charcoal nub, flip to the last blank page, and begin to draw. First, a crooked shape, 2 dots, a zigzag, a loop. That's the chicken chase, you declare. Oswin adds 3 more. This one's the lost boot. That's the broom of destiny. And that's Oswinus Maximus, ruler of stars. You both laugh, quiet and real. And you realize something. You're not just passing time, you're building something, a little cosmos of your own, in a book not meant to be yours, filled with rules you're learning to bend, and it feels important. You finish the drawing, stare at it, then write, beneath it, these are ours, even if no one sees them. Oswin leans back, arms behind his head. We're gonna have to hide that book better, he says. What if the steward finds it? You nod because he's right. This much imagination, this much audacity, it's dangerous. You glance around. Then, slowly, carefully, you tuck the book inside the hay wall, a tiny hollow behind the feed sacks. Dry. Hidden. You press the hay back in place. Done? Safe. You lie down beside it, staring up at the roof beams. Oswin mumbles something about soup and dreams. You close your eyes, and for the first time in weeks, you fall asleep with a smile. Because even if you wake to mud and orders, tonight, you dreamed of stars you chose. You wake to the sound of hooves, not the usual clip-clop of a horse being led from the paddock, nor the relaxed shuffle of a sleepy mare dreaming of apples. This is panic, panic in hoof form. You sit up too fast. Hay clings to your face, your tunic, your dreams. Oswin's still drooling on his sleeve, completely unaware that some small, horse-based apocalypse may be underway. You scramble to the edge of the loft and peer down. Chestnut is out of his stall, again, but this time, he's not just wandering, he's staging a jailbreak. Troughs are overturned. A bucket has committed a dramatic exit. And in the center of it all, Chestnut prances in slow, furious circles, like a horse attempting an avant-garde dance about societal collapse. You whisper the stable boy's morning prayer. Oh no, Oswin stirs. Did we miss breakfast? We might miss everything. And so begins another day. No bells needed, no roosters. Just chaos, sweat, and the ever-present risk of hoof-related injuries. Welcome back to your life, where your alarm clock is a sentient cloud of dust and regrets. You slide down the ladder, no time for boots, just bare feet, grim determination, and the knowledge that this will be one of those mornings. Which leads us squarely to rule number 14. Sleep is not a right, it's a myth, like polite geese or honest merchants. You attempt to corral Chestnut. He disagrees. He rears slightly, then bolts through the open stable door, like a man with dinner reservations. You chase, of course. Because you're the stable boy. Because no one else will. Because you're not allowed not to. Osmond joins you in a heroic barefoot sprint across the yard, hay still stuck in his hair like crown jewels. The cook screams again. Chestnut makes a swift left through the herb patch and ends up behind the laundry line, where he becomes briefly entangled in someone's bloomers. You seize the moment, grab the halter. He snorts like a kettle, but you hold firm. Whisper nonsense. Offer forgiveness. Possibly bribe him with half a carrot you found in your pocket from yesterday's lunch. That wasn't. He relents. You lead him back. You and Oswin collapse beside the gate once he's secure. You know, Oswin says between breaths, if horses ever revolt, he's their leader. You nod. He already is. A small silence. Then, did you sleep at all? You shake your head. Barely. Me neither, he mutters, pulling a pebble from his heel. You both sit like broken statues for a moment before rising, slowly, creakily, and getting on with the rest of the morning. Because the truth is, sleep is a luxury here. You don't get rest. You get interruptions between disasters. Even when you sleep, it's light. The kind of rest where one ear is always listening for hooves, where every dream smells faintly of wet hay, where your body lies still, but your muscles continue mucking out, stalls, somewhere in the background. Historians argue whether medieval workers suffered from chronic fatigue. The answer, if they asked you, would be obviously. Your joints sound like someone stepping on old bread. Your back is doing things spines were never meant to do, and your eyes have adopted a permanent haunted librarian aesthetic. But no one asks, so you carry on. The steward appears at dawn's edge. He's holding a list. Of course he is. He assigns tasks without looking up. You're on grooming duty. Oswin gets manure detail. He scowls. Again? The steward arches an eyebrow. I mean, thank you, sir. You both split off. Grooming sounds pleasant. It's not. Because today's horse is the Lord's new destrier. Big. Black. Built like a siege engine. Goes by the name Mourner. Comforting. You approach with the caution usually reserved for active volcanoes. He eyes you. You hold up the brush. He blinks. You move forward an inch. He flares his nostrils and emits a sound like a belligerent foghorn. You pause. He scratches his hoof against the dirt in a way that says, touch me. And you lose something important. You whisper the grooming incantation, please don't kill me. I'm just the help. You start with his shoulder. Long, slow strokes. Non-threatening. Respectful. The kind you'd offer a king or a cranky uncle with a sword. He allows it. Progress. Eventually, he even leans into it. You feel a flicker of pride, the same kind one might feel after taming a dragon with a hairbrush. You finish, step back, and admire your work. Then he sneezes in your face. Twice. You wipe your eyes and your soul. Later, you find Oswin near the compost, face down in what may or may not be a puddle. Did you pass out, you ask? No, he mutters. I'm just thinking very deeply into the ground. You sit beside him. Hand him a crust of bread you forgot you had. He takes it. Doesn't question the fuzz, because when you sleep as little as you do, even chewing feels like a power nap. You think nights feel like this? Oswin asks, blinking into the dirt. Probably not. Yeah, they probably nap. Under trees, with songbirds. And squires, you add, who actually help. You both sigh. The wind stirs the straw piles. Somewhere in the distance, a chicken screams. You both ignore it. There's nothing you can do. Not today. Because today, you've already run a marathon, been sneezed on by a warhorse, and written exactly 0 pages in the secret book tucked beneath a loose plank in the hayloft. Tonight, maybe. If you're not too tired, if the stars are out, if Chestnut doesn't decide to stage another coup, you don't even make it to supper. Your plan was simple: eat something vaguely edible, slip away to the loft, unearth the book, and finally write down what mourner's snot feels like in poetic metaphor. Something like the breath of a sneezy god. But no, instead, you're called to the kitchen yard to assist with livestock transfer. That sounds benign. It is not. Livestock transfer is stable speak for pigs. Big ones, screechy ones, with eyes that suggest they know your schedule and have no intention of respecting it. So, as the evening settles into its sleepy golden hour, you're elbow deep in squealing chaos. Oswin's job is to distract. Your job is to guide. Neither job is successful. One of the pigs bolts straight through the garden, over the carrot rows, through a laundry line, and, in a final flourish, into the stew pot courtyard. The cook screams. Again, you're starting to suspect she enjoys it. You and Oswin give chase naturally, because rule number 15 doesn't wait. If something escapes, it is automatically your fault, regardless of physics, evidence, or common sense. You corner the pig near the larder. It glares at you, unafraid. You hold out your hands like a mediator in a hostage situation. Oswin flanks left. Maybe, you whisper, we name him and raise him as our own. Ah, too late, Oswin mutters. I already called him Bacon. You lunge. The pig dodges. You trip. Oswin grabs the tail. A mistake. The pig squeals loud enough to shatter several moral boundaries and bolts straight towards the manor steps. It's not until the steward himself appears, with a face like a storm cloud dressed in velvet, that the pig stops, freezes, as if aware it has crossed a line. The steward says nothing, just stares, then gestures. You both seize the pig and drag it back to the pen, dignity in tatters. You are now several bruises richer, and exactly one supper poorer. Afterwards, you wash your hands in the trough. The water's cold. Your arms ache. Your soul mutters quietly in Latin. The sun's dipped now, fully gone. The sky above the stables is painted in navy and peppered with stars. You look up. There it is, your constellation, the chicken chase. Still faint, still mostly nonsense. But yours? You slip away. Up the loft ladder. Oswin follows, yawning like a man twice his age. He curls up in a heap of straw. You reach behind the feed sack, heart light, fingertips eager, and stop. The book is gone. You freeze. You search again. Frantic now. Hay flying everywhere. Straw in your hair. Your boots. Your soul. Nothing. Just dust. And dread? Oswin, you whisper. He stirs. What? It's gone. He sits up. What's gone? The book. He blinks. No, it has to be. Didn't you hide it under the... I did. You both search. Together. Every plank, every bundle, every crevice. Nothing. You sit back, breathing hard. Oswin's eyes are wide. You don't think. You do. You absolutely do. Someone found it. Someone knows. A pit forms in your gut. Heavy. Cold. You whisper the words you swore never to say out loud. What if the steward read it? Oswin goes pale. You wrote about him. You nod. Several times. With diagrams. Yes. A long pause. Then, we're doomed. You lean against the wall. Stare at the stars. All your thoughts, your words, your silly sketches, gone. Maybe burned. Maybe laughed at. Maybe being used to plot your punishment right now. Historians still argue how literate the average steward was in the late medieval period. You sincerely hope yours can't read, or at the very least, can't detect sarcasm in sentence form. Oswin puts a hand on your shoulder. We'll get it back. You shake your head. How? He grins. We'll steal it. You blink. From whom? The steward? Maybe. You want to rob the man who once kicked a turnip through a window? He shrugs. Do you have a better idea? You don't. But you do have a very bad feeling that the book is sitting somewhere very official right now. Maybe even on the steward's desk. Maybe open to the page where you compared his beard to a disgruntled badger. You groan. And yet, you're also proud because someone saw it, touched it, read it, maybe even kept it, and that means it mattered. Even if it ends with you mucking out the privy for a month, the thought is strange and warm. Tomorrow, Oswin says, already drifting off, we find out where it went. You nod. Because you're not giving up. Not yet. Because a stable boy with a secret book might not be important to the world, but he's important to himself. And that's a kind of magic too. You don't sleep well. You dream of haystacks that whisper your secrets, of goats in judges' robes reading your diary aloud to a jury of disgruntled pigs. Somewhere in the background, the steward paces in slow circles, holding your book and shaking his head in infinite disappointment. You wake up tangled in a blanket you don't remember having, your face pressed against a horseshoe. Oswin is already up, halfway through a breakfast of, you're not sure. It might be an apple. It might also be a turnip in denial. He looks at you and says, we have a plan. You blink. We do? He nods, chewing. Yes. Step 1, find the book. Step 2, regret everything. Solid. You get up, joints creaking like a door in a haunted house. You brush the hay off your shirt, your hair, your tongue. Today, you're not just a stable boy. You're a detective, or at least a very tired teenager with limited access to resources and absolutely no formal investigative training. Which brings you directly into rule number 16. Mind the Lord's favorite stallion. He minds you. This becomes relevant about 7 minutes later, when you sneak into the main stable aisle to casually investigate the steward's office and accidentally make eye contact with Borealis. A stallion so expensive he wears blankets more luxurious than anything you've ever touched. He does not like being looked at. You know this. You forgot this. He stares at you like you've just suggested abolishing oats. You raise a hand in peace. He snorts, threateningly. You take a step. He takes a bigger step. Oswin hisses from behind the stall door. Distract him! You hiss back. With what? My dignity? But there's no time. Borealis shifts his weight, preparing for what can only be described as either a charge or an interpretive dance of dominance. You toss a handful of straw. He flinches. You run. Oswin grabs your arm and yanks you into the empty tack room just before the stallion snorts again and trots off. Offended. Heart hammering. You whisper, we are not qualified for espionage. Oswin grins. We've survived goats, pigs, and mourners' allergies. We've got this. You nod. Mostly because breathing is hard and you'd like to stop moving now. Once the coast is clear, you tiptoe toward the steward's office. It's locked. Of course it is. The steward is nothing if not predictably paranoid. But Oswin, resourceful soul that he is, produces a bent nail from his belt. Where did you get that? You ask. Parsley stepped on it. Was he okay? No, but I got this. You watch as Oswin works the nail in the keyhole with alarming confidence. You're about to question how many doors he's opened before when, click, it opens. The office is small, cramped, dusty in a dignified way. There's a shelf of rolled parchment scrolls, a desk with a ledger the size of a goat, and an inkpot so dry it might qualify as sculpture. You don't see the book. You search. Gently, respectfully, desperately. But it's not here. Aswin opens a drawer and lifts out a small cloth pouch. Inside, buttons, string, and an acorn? You both stare at it. He whispers, blackmail. You shake your head. Then something catches your eye. A sheet of parchment, sitting on the desk. It has your handwriting on it. One of the pages, torn from the book. You pick it up slowly, heart loud in your ears. It's the page about Chestnut, and the line about him trying to murder you gently. There's a note below it, written in unfamiliar script. Whoever wrote this understands horses better than the steward does. You stare. Oswin leans over your shoulder. Wait, that's not the steward's writing. You nod, because he's right. Someone else has it. Someone who read it and liked it. You pocket the page and slip out of the office before your luck runs out completely. Back in the hayloft, you sit in stunned silence. Someone not only took your book, but took care with it. That changes things. You don't feel angry. You feel seen. Okay, Oswin says, pacing now. So who else could have taken it? You think? A noble? No, they wouldn't bother. The mistress? She hates dirt. She wouldn't touch hay, let alone crawl through it. The farrier? Too busy. Too loud. Then it clicks. The scribe, you whisper. What? The traveling scribe. The one who passed by last week. Remember, the man with the pack of books? Oswin stares. That guy? He looked at me, right before he left. Lots of people look at you, mostly with pity. You nod. But this was different. Oswin considers. Well, we find him. Right. Because it's so easy to track a man who reads. But something stirs in your ribs again. That restless feeling. That ache for answers. You know it's probably foolish. Chasing a stranger over a lost book. But it's your book. Your words. Your world. And somewhere out there, someone is holding it. Not laughing. Not mocking. Reading. And maybe, just maybe understanding. That's worth chasing. Even if you trip over a few more pigs along the way, you don't run away immediately. You think about it, of course. You imagine it in great detail, stuffing a crust of bread, a bit of salted meat, and Oswin into a satchel, sneaking past the manor gates under cover of night, and tracking the scribe by vague literary intuition and the power of adolescent angst. But there's a problem. Actually, there are several. First, you don't know where the scribe went. Second, you don't know how to leave without getting caught. And third, perhaps most pressing, you're on dung duty this week, which means you'll be shoveling the regrets of 14 horses until further notice. So instead, you wait, you plan, you think. And while you do, you get to know the contents of the manure pile intimately. This leads naturally to rule number 17. If something is missing, you probably took it. Even if you didn't, especially if you didn't. The steward proves this the very next morning. You're ankle deep in stall muck when he storms into the barnyard, holding something above his head like it's a serpent, and he's a very grumpy Moses. It's a brush. A hoof brush. He bellows, who left this in the water bucket? You blink. You haven't touched a hoof brush since Tuesday. You haven't touched water since yesterday. And you're pretty sure you bathed in that bucket at some point during a heat wave. Still, your name is summoned. You freeze. Oswin mutters, just say thank you and accept your fate. You do. The punishment? Extra work. You're now also responsible for checking the feed sacks, all of them, for inconsistencies. You're not even sure what that means. Mold? Rocks? Time-traveling weasels? You spend the next hour poking oat bags and occasionally whispering, are you consistent? Like a mad priest. And the whole time, your mind buzzes with one thought. The book is out there, somewhere between all these punishments and piles of poop. Someone is reading your thoughts, your words. You start to think of them as a friend, a silent one, a smart one, someone who knows that metaphors don't belong to nobles. Each day that passes without the book's return is another small confirmation. It's not coming back. And maybe that's okay, because you remember what it felt like to write it. You still have the words. You can write more. You begin stealing scraps of parchment, bits from ledgers, the margins of discarded delivery notices, a receipt for a sheep that no longer exists. At night, by candle stub or moonlight, you scribble thoughts, fragments, descriptions of the horses, the way Oswin laughs, the exact sound a wheelbarrow makes when the wheel is loose. One night, you write, "The moon tonight is a pearl dropped in soot." Oswin reads it and says, "Wow, that's unnecessarily romantic for something I just peed under." You shrug. He's not wrong, but you write anyway. Because even though the original book is gone, the practice of writing remains, and it does something to your brain, smooths out the roughness of the day, gives shape to the nonsense, and makes you feel like more than just a boy with dirt under his fingernails and a goat with boundary issues. One evening, while hauling water from the creek, you see it. A traveler, not the scribe, but a woman, with a bundle of scrolls on her back and a worn satchel tied with red cord. She's speaking with the steward. You crouch behind a bale of hay, watching like a squirrel with performance anxiety. She hands him a list. He grunts. She laughs. And then she pulls something from the satchel. A book, small, bound in leather. Your breath catches. Could it be? No. This one's too clean. Too new. The steward barely glances at it. She tucks it back away. They finish their conversation. She turns to leave. You run. Not toward her. That would be too obvious. You loop around the outer wall, pretend to check the feed cart, then casually bump into her as she exits the gate. She stumbles, laughs. "Careful, lad." You blink. "Sorry, miss. Just wondering. Do you trade books?" She squints at you. "Sometimes. Have you seen one? A small one with sketches, charcoal, and terrible spelling." She grins. "Terrible spelling narrows it down to half the kingdom." You flush. She considers. "Then, a week ago, I met a man on the road. Said he'd been gifted a stable boy's journal. Called it honest. Said it was funny, too. That you compared your goat to a failed political revolution." You nod. "That was me." She tilts her head. "Why write it all down?" You hesitate. "Because no one else will." She stares, then reaches into her satchel, pulls out a blank book, no cover, just rough binding, thick parchment. She hands it to you. "Keep going." You gape. "Why?" "Because I'm tired of reading about kings," she says. "I want to know what it smells like behind the stables." You grin. "Mostly onions and disappointment." She walks away laughing. You stare at the book in your hands. New, empty, full of possibility. You run back to the loft. Oswin looks up. "You steal that." "No," you pant. "I earned it." He squints. "That sounds worse." You flip it open. And write, "Day 1." Again. You don't show anyone the new book. Not at first. You hide it the way others might hide a treasure map or a letter from someone too important to explain. It lives inside your tunic during the day, wrapped in a scrap of linen. At night, it sleeps beneath your head, disguised as a particularly lumpy bit of straw. And still, somehow, Parsley finds it. Twice. You now wrap it in 2 layers of linen. But the thing about having a blank book is, it starts to whisper. It nags you gently. It asks questions like, "Are you going to write tonight?" And "Is that really the best simile you could come up with for Oswin's hair?" So you write. quietly. Sometimes just a sentence, sometimes 3 pages. And somehow, you're back where you began, but different. This brings you to rule number 18. The weather is your boss now. All other authority is optional, because the moment you get a brand new book, the sky decides to become aggressively poetic. Rain, wind, sleet. One very confused patch of snow in July. And through it all, the stables don't stop. You're still out there with the shovel, the curry brush, the half rusted bucket. Only now, you're also dodging hailstones the size of walnuts and muttering oaths under your breath that the local monks would very much frown upon. Your hands chap, your boots never dry. Oswin gets struck by lightning. Okay, fine, not struck, but he definitely touched a metal gate during a storm, and now his hair does a thing. You come to understand that the weather doesn't hate you personally. It just has a deeply antagonistic sense of humor. One morning, a sudden downpour turns the yard into soup. You slip, land in something unmentionable, and receive an applause of one, Parsley. He bleats once and walks away, like a theater critic unimpressed with your pratfall. The steward assigns extra muck duty because clearly this was your fault. You trudge through the day, and at night, soaked and sore, you write, "The wind today tried to take my hat. Joke's on it, I don't have a hat." Ozan reads it and chuckles. This is either poetry or the early signs of exposure. You both know the truth. It's both because working in weather like this blurs the line between misery and meaning. You learn the language of storms. You count time in thunderclaps. You watch clouds like scholars read Latin. And somehow, the book becomes your little shelter. Not from the rain, but from the part of life that says you're only as valuable as what you carry, clean, or obey. In your book, you get to name things. You get to remember. One evening, you sketch Mourner's profile and label it Mood. Perpetual judgment. Oswin adds a speech bubble. That brush better be organic. You draw the steward's boots next, mostly because they're always visible before the yelling starts. You label them Coming Soon, Regret. It's childish. It's beautiful. And it makes you feel like you're not just surviving. You're noticing. The storms pass, sort of. They turn into heat waves, which means your water bucket now doubles as a sauna. Oswin invents a system involving 2 ladles and an upside-down feed sack to create what he calls the peasant cooling helmet. It's damp, it's itchy, it actually sort of works. The horses sweat, you sweat. Even Parsley sweats, though he maintains his dignity throughout. And still, you write. Because the weather, despite being your tyrant, is also your muse. One night you write, "Lightning is the sky writing its own diary. I wonder if it's any good." You write about the mud that sucks at your boots, the steam rising from horsebacks at dawn, the thunder that rattles your bones, but makes the whole world pause. You even write about the way the stars look clear after the rain. And that's when you realize the book isn't just about you anymore. It's about here, about everything this life holds. The stink, the splinters, the secrets, the silver lining on a storm cloud. You write about the noises the barn makes after midnight. The ones that might be rats, might be ghosts, might be Oswin sleep mumbling about cheese again. You write it all. Because one day someone might find this, might flip through the pages and say, "So this is what it was like." And they'll see more than rules and punishments. They'll see you, a boy with sore hands, a sharp tongue, a goat for an enemy, and a heart full of words no one asked for. But that mattered anyway. The next storm arrives on a Wednesday. You know this because your bucket told you so. It hasn't held water for 2 days. Now it's full again, which can only mean the sky finally finished sulking. The wind howls, the rafters moan, and you sit by candlelight, quill in hand, writing down the day in full soggy detail. Today, I fought the wind. I lost, but I looked really dramatic while doing it. You tuck the book under your makeshift pillow, lie back, and smile. Because even if tomorrow brings snow, fire, or an uprising of chickens, you've got pages left and stories to fill them. The manor receives visitors. This is never good news for you. It means more horses to stable, more boots to shine, more invisible chores to be blamed for. It also means more nobles, those strange, perfumed creatures who regard you the way one might study a beetle, vaguely intrigued, mostly repulsed, and unwilling to acknowledge your capacity for thought. Oswin sums it up best. They bring silk, speeches, and zero understanding of mud. The yard is a flurry of motion. Men at arms unload supplies. Cooks yell. The steward's stress level increases in direct proportion to the volume of his yelling, and for the first time in 3 weeks, someone actually cleans the front steps. The horses are beautiful, of course, glossy, tall, well fed. One of them wears gold threaded blankets. You touch it. You probably shouldn't. It's like petting royalty, soft, aloof, and capable of biting if displeased. Which brings us to rule number 19. You're poor, but the horse has silk blankets. Accept this. Move on. You wheel another cart of hay past a lady whose dress costs more than your village. She doesn't notice you, but her lapdog does. It growls, possibly in French. Aswin nearly trips over a noble's polished boot. The noble doesn't blink. Oswin apologizes to the boot itself. By the time the sun sets, you've brushed 4 horses, cleaned 3 saddles, and answered the same question. Is there anyone in charge here? At least 7 times. You find a quiet moment in the loft. Just you, the book, and the stars creeping in behind the shutters. You write, a man arrived today with rings on every finger and none on his sole. His horse asked for oats politely. The man didn't. You flip the page and sketch the lapdog, labeling it threat level, unreasonably high. Oswin plops down beside you, nursing a bruised shin. I tripped over a sword, he mutters. Was it being used? No, it was decorative. He takes the book, reads your latest lines, and grins. You ever think about writing about, not this? You blink. Like what? I don't know, castles, dragons, romance. You scoff. We live under a staircase made of hay. What do we know about romance? He shrugs. More than the noble with the dog named Cheval. You grin. You do think about it, sometimes. About stories beyond these walls. About writing things no one expects from someone like you. But even now, you know there's power in this story. In the dirt. In the sweat. In the way a stable boy learns to read clouds better than books, and horses better than men. Oswin pulls something from his tunic. A pastry. Stolen, obviously. He breaks it in half. You share it in silence. Outside, someone's playing a lute. The notes are lovely and slightly off-key, like the musician's heart is too big for the song. You both lie back, heads on your respective hay pillows. I think we're part of something, Oswin says. You turn to him. He's staring at the rafters. Something people won't remember, he adds. But maybe they should. You nod. Because this life, messy, loud, smelly, is real. And real deserves remembering. You reach for the book. Right. We may not have silk, but we have straw and stories. And that's something. You sketch the pastry, label it Victory Pie. Then you draw a tiny version of Oswin. He has wings. You don't explain. He doesn't ask. The next morning, the nobles leave. The yard smells like perfume and horse sweat. You and Oswin clean up the leftovers. Bits of ribbon, crushed fruit, and one leather glove that no one claims. Oswin wears it like a crown. Call me Sir Lefty, he declares. You bow. Your Majesty. He tosses you a bit of cheese. Stale, but edible. And you realize you're not rich. But you're rich and weird. And weird is its own kind of wealth. especially when you write it down. Later, you sit in the corner of the barn, pen in hand. You write, "The nobles came and went. We remained, like barn cats, or secrets." You pause. Then add, "One day, someone will ask what life was like here, and maybe, if they find these pages, they'll know." Because history doesn't always come from kings. Sometimes it comes from the boys who brush their horses. There's a new boy. His name is Tybalt, which feels suspiciously noble. He has a clean tunic, soft hands, and the expression of someone who has never seen a goat steal a potato. The steward announces his arrival with the kind of reluctant pride usually reserved for donated livestock. "He'll be shadowing you," he says. "Try not to ruin him." You and Oswin exchange glances. Challenge accepted. You show Tybalt the ropes, by which you mean how to avoid stepping in things that squelch, how to look busy while doing absolutely nothing, and how to interpret the difference between a horse's polite tail swish and one that signals incoming doom. Tybalt asks questions. So many questions. What's that smell? Why is that chicken inside? Is parsley supposed to be eating the ledger? You answer as best you can. Unclear. Don't ask. No, but it's too late now. Which leads perfectly into the final decree. Rule number 20. Whatever happens, write it down. Because no one will believe you anyway. Because no one will believe the day Mourner sneezed so hard his saddle fell off. Or the morning Oswin accidentally shaved off half an eyebrow while trimming a horse's tail. Or the evening the cook mistook your journal sketch of her for a drawing of a turnip and took it as a compliment. You begin to understand. Your life is ridiculous, but it's also yours. You share the book with Tybalt, just a page. He stares, then laughs, not cruelly, just delighted. "You wrote this?" he asks. You nod. He flips the page. "Who's Oswinus Maximus?" You point at Oswin, who's currently wearing one boot and trying to charm a pigeon out of the grain bin. Tybalt grins. "This is brilliant." You don't say anything, because brilliant isn't something you've heard often. Certainly not from someone with unblistered palms and a vocabulary larger than shovel. You write that night. We are three now. Two fools and a witness. Oswin contributes a doodle. A three-headed goat labeled the Unholy Stable Trinity. You laugh harder than you have in weeks. Because this is the secret no one tells you about writing. It's not just for remembering, it's for sharing. You start reading your entries aloud, sometimes after chores, sometimes in whispers before sleep, sometimes in the middle of the night when the rain won't stop and your thoughts need a place to drip. The book becomes your fourth friend. It holds everything, the gross, the glorious, the deeply confusing. One morning you write, "A chicken rode a pig today. I don't have more to say about it. Just that." Tybalt adds, "It looked oddly natural." You look back, weeks later, and remember the moment in perfect detail. You remember how the sun hit the feathers, how the pig didn't seem to mind, how that tiny absurdity made everything, mud, chores, sore hands, feel a little lighter. You don't know how long you'll stay here. Maybe forever. Maybe until the next traveler passes by, with room in their pack for a scrappy stable boy and his deeply sarcastic journal. Maybe you'll become a scribe yourself. Maybe you'll just stay and write about hay forever. But no matter what, you'll remember this because you wrote it. And now it can't be taken. Not by the steward, not by the weather, not even by parsley. You close the book one evening, tuck it gently into your satchel, and whisper, "We made something." Oswin, from the corner, mumbles, "Make me a hero next time." You already are. Tybalt snores softly. The lantern flickers low. The barn breathes around you. And somewhere above the loft, the stars blink on, just in time to read over your shoulder. And now, your eyes are heavy. The barn is quiet. The wind has settled down into a slow whisper, brushing gently against the wooden beams, rattling a loose nail here and there like a lullaby. Only the old buildings know how to hum. The horses are still. Mourner snores, if you can believe it. A low, thunderous breath that rises and falls like a bellows. Oswin shifts in his sleep and pulls the blanket tighter. Tybalt's foot dangles from the hayloft like an apostrophe, completely unaware of the goat staring at it from below. Even Parsley, finally, sleeps. The book rests beneath your hand, its pages slightly crinkled. The ink faded in spots where your candle sputtered, or where you smudged a word, laughing too hard to hold still. But the words are there. The memories, the smells, the small victories, the splinters of something brighter than the job you were born into. And in the warm, straw-scented silence, you remember that you never needed permission to notice things, to name them, to write them. So you let your thoughts slow. You think of tomorrow's chores, but only briefly. They'll be there. So will you. So will the stories. And maybe, just maybe, one day, someone will find this book, pages yellowed, corners curled, and smile. Not because the world changed, but because you saw it. And now so can they. The candle flickers, your breath softens, and the last thing you hear before sleep is the creak of the barn roof as it settles in for the night. You did enough today. You are enough. Sleep now, stable boy. The stars will keep watch. End of script. Sweet dreams.